Evening, welcome to the January 8th meeting of the Falmouth Conservation Commission. At this time, please silence your electronic devices. If you're gonna have a private conversation, please take it outside. This meeting is being recorded by FCTV. If there's anybody else recording, please let us know. If you're here to speak on a matter before us, and we encourage you to do so, there'll be an opportunity to do so during the public comment portion of each hearing. At the appropriate time, please approach the podium, state your name for the record, and speak into the microphone. Do we need all?
Mrs. Courtney, right?
Oh, we're missing Courtney. Okay. Kevin, you're up tonight.
Okay.
First up, vote minutes, December 18th, 2019.
I read those.
Okay, right?
The
Yep.
regular meeting, that is.
Yep, I had no problems with it. I'll move to accept
Well,
it.
second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Anybody have anything? All right. All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? It is unanimous. December 18th, executive session.
I read those as well, and they seem to be in order.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Unanimous. December 30th, 2019. That was the really long meeting.
Yeah.
I was not
Yeah,
present.
Yeah. I make a motion to accept.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? It is unanimous. Next up, request for continuance under a notice of intent, Cape House 11 LLC, 207, 217, 223 Meadow Neck Road, East Falmouth, Mass, for permission to enhance and reconstruct an existing coastal engineered structure and to extend the structure along the shoreline.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, the applicant is requesting a continuance until February 12th.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to continue to February 12th. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? It is unanimous. Michael C. and Ann L. Keenan, 101 Lake Lehman Road, Falmouth, Mass, for permission to construct additions and to add a patio to an existing dwelling.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, the applicant has requested a continuance until February 5th.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? It is unanimous.
2520.
Next up, request for determination of applicability. RMB Development, Inc., In Seasons Resorts, 134 Minot Road, East Falmouth, Mass, for permission to upgrade one failed septic system and to upgrade one substandard septic system.
Mr. Chairman, staff recommends a -2 under the state and bylaw. Source area boundaries are not confirmed.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Hearing none, a call for the vote. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Unanimous. Next up, Barbara Susi, 360 Wild Harbor Road, Falmouth, Mass, for permission to construct a single-family dwelling and septic system with associated grading and landscaping.
Mr. Chairman, staff recommends a -2 under the state and bylaw. Resource area boundaries are not confirmed.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Hearing none, I'll call for the vote. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? It is unanimous. Next up, Richard Pierce, 74 Penzance Road, Falmouth, Mass, for permission to upgrade to a Title V subsurface sewage disposal system.
Mr. Chairman, staff recommends a -2 under the state and bylaw. Resource area boundaries are not confirmed.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Hearing none, I'll call for the vote. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? It is unanimous. Next up, Woods Hole Boat Sales, Inc., 352 Scranton Ave, Falmouth, Mass, for permission to replace broken piles and decking on an existing licensed pier.
Mr. Chairman, staff recommends a -2 under the state and bylaw. Resource area boundaries are not confirmed.
Anybody?
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Hearing none, I'll call for the vote. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? It is unanimous. Next up, William J. and Ellen C. Wedge, 78 Associates Road, West Falmouth, Mass., for permission to repair an existing foundation and to construct second-floor additions.
Mr. Chairman, the applicant has requested a continuance until the hearing of January 29th.
So moved.
Second.
We have a request for continuance to January 29th. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? It is unanimous. Next up, okay, request for hearings under notice of intent. All hearings at the Falmouth Conservation Commission are held simultaneously under the authorities of the Massachusetts Wetlands Protection Act and the Falmouth Wetlands Bylaw. Although a single decision of the commission is issued, it represents a separate decision under each authority. First up, Racing Beach Association, Inc., 0 Racing Beach Avenue, parcel 012000, Falmouth, Mass., for permission to replace a 65-foot-long section of drain pipe, remove an old drain pipe and leaching structure, and to install a new manhole. Mr. Borselli?
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the commission. For the record, I'm Michael Borselli from Falmouth Engineering, and I represent the applicant. I'm joined here tonight by William Gindra from the Racing Beach Homeowners Association, who sort of was the lead contact for the association in doing this work. I'm also joined tonight by George Patello from George Patello Inc., who is the contractor who we work on this project if you issue an order of conditions for it. For background, I'm sure you're all familiar with the beach itself, and so Racing Beach is down, the road is directly adjacent to the beach, and it runs parallel to the beach. On the very north end of Racing Beach Avenue, at the very north end of the beach, where it terminates against an existing stone riprap on a private property owned by Paul Hogan, who you've also seen applications for. On that end of the beach, there is an existing drain manhole with an outlet pipe. I'll zoom in on this a little bit. There's an existing dilapidated leaching pit, actually, with a pipe that terminates inside of it. That is the terminal end of a drain pipe that runs from here landward underneath Racing Beach Avenue to an upland freshwater wetland system, a series of ditches that ultimately end up in upstream in a pond. So we were approached by the Racing Beach Association because in coordination with the mosquito control folks, it has become more and more difficult to maintain the flow in this dilapidated pipe because it's very old and it's probably full of sediment, and the dynamics of the tides are such that it continually drives seaweed up in the pipe. So the mosquito control folks are out here almost on a weekly basis because it plugs and the water backs up in the channel, causes flooding upstream, causes stagnancy of the water, causes issues with mosquitoes. So the mosquito control board is tasked with maintaining the flow to protect public health from mosquitoes. So we've met with those folks on a few occasions on site. We came up with what we think is the best solution to fix a bad situation, and they support and endorse the plan that we're proposing. In fact, in your application, there's a letter from them that indicates that they support this. So what is it that we're proposing to do? We're proposing to replace the pipe, remove the old concrete leaching pit, install a new manhole, which is this blue color, further landward. So a pipe will go from this point on this side of the road. We're going to expose the pipe, find the end of it, connect new pipe from this location to the manhole. Then the pipe will run through the manhole. It'll be extended to a place that's landward of mean high water. This current situation is below mean high water. So it's landward of mean high water, and it would have, we'd take advantage of some of the existing stone that's on the beach and create a small splash energy dissipator, and the pipe would be land on top of that, so that the flow from upstream will then be directed through the new pipe. We think that this location out here, the seaweed gets forced up in here because the tides and the winds drive all the seaweed up into this corner. So we're trying to move the outlet slightly up slope to try to mitigate against that plugging. There's no perfect solution, but this we all felt was going to be a better solution, and it'll be an improvement over what's out there now. The seaweed actually has the ability to get driven all the way up in the pipe. In fact, there's been evidence of seaweed on the upstream side of Racing Beach, believe it or not. So they've had to, run a snake through this, clean it, dig it out, and it's amazing how the flow changes once you clear that pipe. So the manhole was an idea where we would have an inline manhole, just like a sewer manhole, with a formed invert inside and the cover. So you could pop the cover and you'd have the ability to snake either direction at about the midpoint of the pipe, instead of having to deal with the entire length of the pipe and having a very densely packed pipe on this side only, so it'll allow you to clean the pipe more readily. And we also feel that if we move the pipe landward and slightly higher in elevation, while still maintaining the pitch that we need to have the water flow, it'll reduce the amount of maintenance that the pipe needs. So the wetland resources in question, of course, are land under the ocean, coastal beach. There is some coastal dune in some areas. There's some vegetation. If you've been here, there's a footpath that meanders through here. There's some cobbly, rocky, sparsely planted areas directly adjacent to the road. So the idea is to remove only the vegetation necessary to do the pipe excavation, excavate and find the pipe, and then trench a new pipe as best we can while continuing to allow the existing pipe to be in place so the water can still flow until the very end, where once the new pipe's installed, we would connect it in this location and then remove any of the pieces that are exposed of the old pipe in the old leaching pit. And then the beach will be at the same profile. It would be the same cobbly beach. The trench would be backfilled, and we'd eliminate this structure on the beach. We'd move it. We'd have a new structure which wouldn't be exposed. It would be flush with the ground and be below grade except for the cover. We'd replant that vegetation, maintain the footpath so that there's still public access to the beach from Racing Beach Avenue. So, we've shown a limit of work that would, is shown in orange on this plan. So the activities of the excavator would be limited to this one small corridor. And that pretty much sums it up, and I'm here if there's specific questions for Mr. Botello about his methodology, he's here to answer questions too.
Mrs. Lincoln, do you want to start?
What are the anticipated impacts to the wetland by allowing it to drain?
Well, the wetland already drains, so we're just maintaining, we're not changing that. All we're doing is,
It drains when mosquito control comes and cleans out the culvert?
it drains routinely and as a normal course of events unless the seaweed interrupts it.
Okay.
So the seaweed is the problem, not the, we're just attempting to maintain the flow. The flow is like necessary or there's an issue with the mosquitoes.
Okay, so it's not like it's a crushed pipe and there hasn't been flow for a while, it's just when the seaweed gets pushed up into the pipe? Because that was my
Yes.
concern, was the staff's concern was like what the impacts to the what would the impacts be if we're draining the wetland out, so.
Well, we've witnessed the seaweed, when the seaweed gets in the pipe, you'll see the water still trying to get out. And then as soon as the mosquito control guys go in with their tool and pull out there's like a plug of seaweed, the water just flows. So there's there's a difference in elevation between the upland side of this pipe and here, and it needs to flow.
Yeah, but the current pipe is submerged, right, the end of the current pipe?
It isn't submerged, no, but it's like it gets buried by sand and seaweed because if it's right in the tidal zone.
Okay, so you're still gonna have that tidal flow going into the pipe the way you have it designed now?
Well, we pulled it landward to get it out of the most tides, and some of the high tides, it still will need maintenance, there's no doubt about it. There'll still be some cleaning of this that's gonna happen. We're just attempting to reduce the amount and make it easier for them to clean it. We're hoping that this, if you notice this dashed line here, the pipe extends all the way out. And have you ever noticed that concrete cylinder that's in the beach with all, it's a leaching pit? If any of you have been out there, you'll see it, and it's all falling apart and corroding. The pipe is in that. That was designed to be like an energy dissipator. The water was supposed to like discharge into that and then seep out. Well, that filled with sand, and now the pipe outlet, if you will, is like constantly buried with sand and seaweed because of where it is on the beach.
Okay, and on the lot you're not proposing to do any work on that lot 124? You're working solely within either the association's property or Racing Beach Ave, which is, believe it's owned by the association, correct? Racing Beach Ave is privately owned by the association.
Yes, the work is limited to, from this point,
Okay.
Seawood. There is a possibility, and we'd come back if we did this for an amendment, that this one section of pipe could be replaced, and there's a method to do that we're still investigating, but right now the plan is just from here to
Okay.
here.
You couldn't push like a sleeve through it or something?
Well, there are methods, and there's like an alternate price to possibly do that, but we're still trying to decide if that's
Okay.
necessary.
And when you described how you were going to construct it, you're gonna leave I guess, so what's the overall timing for the whole thing? And if you already said that and I missed it, I apologize.
We're thinking 2 to 3 days total.
And you need to have that other pipe, you can't just remove that for those 2 or 3 days and put the new pipe exactly where the old one is?
No, because we're,
instead of putting it alongside of it and excavating out more than you need to over there?
well, it would be a very limited, I mean, the width of the bucket, extra excavation trench, where if we try to dig out the existing pipe while we're doing this, then there's gonna be water trying to flow at all times right in the middle of where you're working. So it'll just be impossible to like maintain, and it could actually exacerbate the erosion.
You can't block it off on the upstream side?
Well, we talked about blocking it off, but we're wondering about what impacts that might have upstream if we block it off. We could possibly block it off, and we're also planning on trying to work with the lowest groundwater time and the lowest tidal cycles.
Yeah.
So, we're trying to like balance the interest in, the reason the mosquito control knows it needs to be fixed is people call because it plugs up and then it backs up and upstream, and people have issues in their, on their properties.
Well, I figured if it's only gonna take a day or two, I didn't know if it would back up that fast, that quickly.
Yeah, well, that's a good point.
Yeah.
We've been talking about that, so we may do that.
To kind of limit that excavation and that construction footprint.
We possibly could do that, but we wanted to have the ability to try to keep the existing pipe online if that doesn't work, so that the flow will be maintained during construction. And if it's only a net, basically it's a matter of first finding the pipe and then trenching right next to the old pipe. It's not like a much bigger excavation.
Good, just questions.
Get rid of the old pipe.
Anything, Kevin?
No, Miss Lincoln and I chatted about the project, and she's pretty much hit all of our concerns.
Okay. Those are just some of our comments.
Mark, do you want to start? Anything?
No questions?
Steve?
No, I don't have any questions.
Sorry, I didn't mean to wake you.
No, the question I have, excuse me, Mr. Chairman, thank you for your comment, is this was created to drain this at some time during the construction of the road?
I think it was created because when the road was built, the flow of the
Blocked
water.
the
had-
natural
yeah.
flow of some sort that would have.
So, yeah, I mean, it's been decades this has been here, and mosquito control's been dealing with it for a very long time, yeah.
All right, that was my only question, Mr. Chairman.
No questions.
The end, you're gonna do, the stone. Are you at all concerned about erosion?
No.
Enough flow?
No, it's just gonna be like a at-grade flush stone pad that the pipe will rest on, just so when the water's draining out of the pipe, it has like something to prevent scour, so we don't have
There
any,
was enough velocity to create any kind of erosion?
no.
Thank you. Betsy?
I have no questions, thanks.
Maureen?
No questions, they're all answered.
Kevin? Kevin?
No questions.
Well thought through.
May I make a mo-
Please do.
Make a motion to close the hearing and take it under advisement.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion from the board? Any comments from the public? Hearing none, I'll call for the vote to close the hearing. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? It is unanimous.
Wait,
So
Excuse
you
me,
need
sir.
to stand up to the
Come on.
podium.
This is Mr. Ginder from the association.
The $64 question, we don't have an answer for. This existing system, we figure is at least 100 years old. And it's clay pipe, and,
Really?
so it's not the greatest condition in the world. And the thing we don't know is the condition of the pipe under the road. It's good enough not to block, but if it's about ready to fail, we want, while everything's dug up, we want to replace the pipe under the road at the same time.
Whoa, that's not actually proposed right now.
Well,
We
that's,
don't have the design for that, so if you're in the construction process and you determine that you need to dig up the road, that's not gonna be allowed under this permit, so,
I guess the question is, how quickly can we turn that around?
well, it would have to be an amendment to the permit, so you would have to go through the whole filing of an amendment, the notification to abutters, and all of that. Isn't that what you said, Mike?
Yep.
That you would come back to us with an amendment, and although now the applicant's saying he wants to rip up the road if it's determined while you're doing
Well-
construction, so that's two different
Yeah,
things.
well, right, well, that's what I said, and the plan would never be to actually dig up the road. The plan would be to tunnel, do the tunnel
Do it like a
method.
mole or a sleeve or something.
Right, right.
Okay, because staff does not want to be put in the position when the road is, like, when construction access is dug up, all of a sudden the applicant comes back and says, oh, we need to do it now that the road's ripped up, because that's going to put us in a very difficult
Can you
position.
send a camera in there ahead of time just to get a look-see? And
We possibly could, but we could,
mean-
we can, you voted to close the hearing. When we start the work, before we start the work, we can do a little bit more exploratory work with cameras.
And you'd have the time to,
Then we could, if we really thought it was imperative to replace the pipe, we could still, before we start work, get an amendment. We're pretty confident that the pipe under the road's okay. Once you get upstream a certain distance, the integrity of the pipe, starts to get worse but once you're at the road, I don't see that, if it has to be done, we're gonna do it by that method, and we'd come back for an amendment. And we'd know that before we get into the whole project.
Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, I would make a suggestion unless Jen seriously countermands me, and that is, that perhaps you anticipate this by get this adopted, but file an amendment. And if you decide you're not gonna use it, that's okay, but you
Right.
at least, then the timing of it doesn't screw you up.
Right.
So
that
you
all right?
didn't
What
just
you
vote, you didn't close it.
Yeah, we did.
we voted yet.
Did they all vote?
We'll take another vote. So we have a motion and a second, you have that.
We have a motion and a second, but I didn't hear you all vote if you did.
Right, so is there any further discussion? Yes?
I'm good.
Okay. Any comments from the public? Anyone at all? All right. All those in favor of closing the hearing, take it under advisement, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? It is unanimous. We're done with that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Borselli.
Thank you.
Next up, Scott Canal, 163 Bay Road, North Falmouth, Mass, for permission to conduct shellfish aquaculture within Rands Canal and Megantic Harbor.
Evening, Mr. Chairman, Board. My name is Scott Tynell. I'm the applicant of the, just a little bit about who we are. I grew up in the house where, 63 Bay Road, my family house. We've had it since 63. I learned to walk there. My son, he also learned to walk there, but a little later. And Mike is a mutual friend of both of ours. Both the Boys Scouts, avid hunters, campers, we're all outdoorsmen. And I'd like to think good tenants of the property. Our goal is we're looking to get permission to raise oysters and cohogs on the property. I apologize, I took French, not Latin, so I'm not even going to try to butcher the names there, but our plan is in front of the house at 163 to place an upweller. The upweller will be raising seed. The seed will hopefully be ordered. Typically, the plan is to order the seed in January. It will arrive somewhere around the end of May, June, go into the upweller until it grows out to 6 to 7 millimeters, at which time it will be transferred into mesh bags, which will be tethered in front of the house, using the same system that the town uses at Little Pond with the mesh floating bags. There would be, at our property, 8 helix anchors, 4 on each side of the dock, so that we can have 2 rafts, one on each side. The pipes have a PVC collar. The bags go toe to heel, locked together, and then float up and down with the tide. With the seed in there, we would be moving the seed once the end of September comes. Our equipment has to be out of the water in Rands Canal by October, when it reopens to shellfishing to the public, at which time we'd move the grown seed out to our deep water site in Megantic Harbor, which is outlined in the project. It would be overwintered there, and then once again come around the middle of March, the seed from the previous year would be brought, split back into cages and bags, grown out in the deep water, and the cycle would begin again with the seed. Bottom cages, daisy chained, vortex anchors with chain to anchor them and hold them in place in the deep water. I think we already went over that. Initially, we would probably be starting with a scaled-down version to try and shake out any problems we might have. Probably 100,000 animals to initially grow, make sure that the grow process, the bag process, and the wintering, we have it down. And if there are any problems, we can address them before we scale it up into a larger operation. And that's the way the sunset ends over the project, and hopefully you'll look on it favorably. There were a couple of concerns that I was informed about late this afternoon from one of the abutters about some of the issues with the way filings were done. This has been a bit of a long, slow project. Rather than going to multiple agencies first, I've gone from one department to the next so that if there were problems, we could address them, straighten them out to their concerns, and then progress to the next department. When we were after we went to the original selectmen's meeting, the DMF had some issues initially with the way the discussion went the evening of the first meeting, that the upweller and upland side operation in the canal was not addressed sufficiently, so they requested that we go back a second time. We did that, and then unfortunately they felt that the second meeting didn't strongly connect the upweller with the deep water grow-out site, so we had to go back for a third meeting, at which time we made sure that it was pretty clear that all 3 meetings were about the same 2 projects, that it's just 2 different phases. Not sure. There's conflict as to how far out the bags would be. We wouldn't be looking to go further out into the canal than our existing dock goes. It would be foolish for us to want to put the gear out where it would be a navigational problem. We don't want to lose product and gear. So the thought is that if we hold a parallel line to our dock structure right now, that's already inside the deep water channel, and if people are clearing the boat on the dock, then they're also going to be clearing the bags on the sides. I don't know if there's any questions. I'm sure there's things I didn't cover, but
Mr. Newton?
happy to try and answer anything now.
I'll yield to Jen on this.
Pardon me?
I'm just gonna yield to Jen if she has any
Okay.
comments. I don't have any.
Scott, the upwell is already on site?
The upwell is on property. It's not
Yeah.
installed. It's about a 10 by, it's virtually identical to the units that the town is using at the Falmouth Harbor location.
And where is it on the property that you're going to locate it?
There is my property is divided in 2 by a road, and on the water side of the road, there is a hard-packed area that has been used for decades, basically as either a trailer or a boat area that's right off. There's a little parking area there in that location there. It's approximately 25 to 30 feet off the end of the existing dock, and by placing it there, There would be a minimal line run for water between the beginning of the ramp for the dock to go out. We'd run the PVC piping for water along the dock, using the dock structure itself to carry the pipes, so that there would only be a small path that we'd have to cross across the wetlands to the upweller where it would be.
Okay, that hasn't been permitted yet, the upweller. The placement of the upweller, is that that's part of this project, correct?
That would be part of this project.
Okay, so, we don't have any concerns with the, substantive part of the project. I mean, we see oyster, shellfish grants on the side, we permit them. I do think I need a little bit more information on the placement of that upweller across in the wetlands, how you're gonna get the salt water to that upweller and those things. And I think that goes to, one of the, A.M. Wilson's comments about just a more detailed, I think, site plan on the Bay Road property. Not, I don't mean the deep water
The water
side.
grow out area. right.
Yeah, just kind of that,
Sure.
closer to the dock, where the upweller is, relation to the dock, the boat ramp, everything. Are the bags gonna be placed on the north or the south side of that dock?
Both.
Both, so.
There'd be a smaller pod on the northerly and then the longer stretches on the southerly.
Okay, so, and just in general, things like that, so, abutters have like a little bit more detailed plan to look at?
Okay.
Yeah, and that's it. Those are my only questions. Just where that upweller is going to be. And you wanna do oysters, quahogs, how are you gonna do the quahogs? Just,
Initially, we're gonna be doing oysters. We're saying oysters and quahogs because once we start slamming it out of the park on oysters, we're gonna be looking to do other things.
okay,
It's just, those are the two most likely markets, so we're presenting them at the same time.
okay.
Oysters are the initial.
Obviously, oysters in the bag, quahogs are gonna be, field planted.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, all right. That's it.
Courtney?
No questions.
Kevin?
Is this relevant?
I mean, those are some of the concerns that the abutters has raised. Their consultants here to, I believe, present their
Okay,
questions
But I mean,
or concerns.
today's January 8th, right?
We received it today, yes, Gary.
Okay. No questions.
Mara?
Yeah, I have not had the opportunity to read all of
just
this.
got it.
Yeah.
So, yeah,
Um,
I think we're gonna
I'm
be
all set with questions. Jen covered what I was concerned about, the upweller location.
more detail for you.
Yeah, I have no question.
Russell? You good? Steve?
No, thank you.
Peter?
I have a question. Did you contact the harbor master to see if it would impact the boating traffic?
My first stop was with the harbor master and the Department of Natural Resources. They've both been aware, seen all the plans, and have no
And we didn't get anything
concerns
from
at the
Chuck, did
moment
we?
that they have raised. They were actually where I started this quest several years ago.
Thank you.
I have no questions.
All right. Then we're gonna want a continuance for the details that you want? Will that constitute a site plan?
Yeah, I mean, just a site plan
So
of
we're gonna need
that near shore area. Like where the dock is, where the boat ramp is, where the bags are gonna be located. It's just a little different than some of the offshore sites we're used to seeing,
A
so.
little more detailed in the.
Yeah, a little bit more detail in
Sure.
that near shore area, I think will just alleviate a lot of people's concerns.
Good.
Give the harbor master, if you wanted something in writing from the harbor
Yeah,
master.
we probably should have it in the
Yeah,
file.
I can get that for you. And you just call over there tomorrow and have him put something in writing.
Thank you.
All right, so we're gonna want a continuance.
Yeah.
Okay.
Scott, how long do you think it'll take you to get a site plan? Couple of weeks?
Probably, hopefully, just a couple of weeks.
Yeah, when are you looking to begin operations? I'm assuming this summer?
We'd like to start with the initial growth this year, so
Okay.
we're probably already gonna be late with ordering the seed and whatnot, so we wanna make sure that everything's done and done right first.
Okay.
If we get a little late, it's,
So what,
couple of weeks would be hopefully sufficient to get the site plan.
so, I mean, we're pretty much meeting straight through right now. We don't have any scheduled time off through February, so it's up to you. I have the 15th, well, obviously not next week, but I have the 22nd, the 29th, the 5th, the 12th
How about if can we go for the 29th at this point?
of January? Yeah,
Please.
and if you need more time, that's fine.
Thank you.
Yeah.
At 1:20,
Okay. Should I make a motion?
1:20.
Yeah, and then I'll get comment. 'cause I know there's-
Request of the applicant to continue until January 29th?
Correct.
29th or 20th?
29th.
I'm sorry, 29th, thank you.
Correct.
Second?
29th.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second to continue to January 29th. Is there any further discussion from the board? Any comments from the public?
Arlene Wilson, A.M. Wilson Associates. We're representing the Mammaries, who are abutters across the waterway. And I'm not going to go through that whole letter. There are a lot of sort of nitpicky things that are missing from the notice itself. But one of our real concerns about the segment that is on Mr. Tynell's property is the upweller, which really isn't even mentioned in the application, although it was mentioned in some of the selectmen's reviews, but not all. Our office has actually represented Katuitt Oyster over the years, and so we know something about raising oysters in upwellers and bags. The upweller situation, the return water has a lot of organic load in it, and so you probably want to take a look at how that's handled, particularly in terms of water quality for the area. The application also says that the bags are going to be in the intertidal zone. You really don't want those bags sitting on the bottom, and if they're in the intertidal zone, it's going to be difficult to prevent that. The bags have a tendency in very shallow water to act like semi-permeable groins, and so if there's a navigation concern, those bags are apt to still the water flow down. The load of sediment that would normally be in longshore transport is going to get dumped, and it'll result potentially in the creation or extension of bars in the area, which will make navigation difficult. If that upweller is going to be in his yard, you probably want to look at flood concerns as well. How is he going to tie that thing down? The flood elevation in that area, I think, is 17, and the velocity zone cuts through the upland. I don't actually know if it runs across his property or not, but that kind of thing would be a concern. I know he said he's going to take the bags out in anticipation of storm events. It makes a lot of wear and tear on the marsh and the beach intertidal zone in that area, because it'll be a lot of movement. So I think there are a lot of issues that need to be looked at that you might not normally think of for an aquaculture project, just because this particular one is going to be in very shallow water right hard up against a salt marsh. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any further, sir?
My name is Brad Baldwin. I have two properties that are abutting the property that he has. And I only reviewed the application briefly, I've had it for a day. And I have concern for various reasons about this. First of all, I don't know what an upweller is because I didn't know anything about it. I'd like definition of what an upweller is and what it does and scope and everything pertaining to what it is, because I don't even know what that is. And also, beyond the fact that there's going to be these floating bags, I think it's 9,000 square feet of bags floating in the canal. I'd like to know pertaining to, because I haven't seen any like that, in the area here, is there any impact to, there's a lot of birds in the area, smell, impact to the surrounding properties. And that's in the seed, I guess, the phase as far as before they transfer it out into the outside harbor when they're out there. So they would be grown in the bags, I understand, from the application, and then transferred out into the outer harbor, into that other 6,000 square foot parcel that's between Half Tide Rock and the breakwater. Then, when they become mature, that whole process goes in the next phase, which is harvesting as a commercial entity, bringing those in. I will tell you, as a resident, there's 2 current aquaculture properties that are out there in the water right now, and I hear pressure washers and all kinds of activity out there all day long, every day. And as they become mature, it's a commercial operation. One commercial operation right now goes in and lands their shellfish into Fiddler's Cove, and the other one was going into the other side of, operated by Perini, into the other side of Rands Canal. And this past several weeks ago, that operation, he left his property unattended, and his shellfish shuttle boat catamaran, he left it sinking upside down in the canal with all kinds of, I have pictures, I can provide pictures of it, and unattended until I had to call the harbor master to come and have somebody remove the boat, and the operator of the license never even bothered. So my concern is long-term concern about maintaining the property and everything pertaining to what there is, more than what's on the Rands Canal section, but what's out there, and blocking the waterways pertaining to traffic of boats. And I've seen in the application where he wants to put it, but there's a third property out there that's of concern. But most importantly to me, I have concern is where the mature shellfish are being brought in and harvested and cleaned. They don't just throw them in a truck and take them away. And then there's more trucks, commercial trucks and diesel trucks or whatever trucks, and the sound and the cleaning. I have concern about all these features that we're not even looking at this point. And this is a residential area, not a commercial area. Give me one moment. Also, off-season storage, I mean, all these, not in the seed portion of the phase, but once they're mature, and all these traps that wash up on the beach, because I get them every year on my beach, because I have beach that's facing Megantic Beach, and they typically bring them in groupings, and they store them, so they smell all season long. The storage of these, not the seed bags, I'm talking about where they're put out as mature shellfish out into the harbor once they're brought in, because they're routinely cycled in and cycled out. And I'd like to know, I mean, I don't want boxes of these, seed, these shellfish sitting in the yard, smelling, and having all the, the birds coming around. It's a burden on the neighborhood, and I'm really concerned about that. And I'd like detailed regulations pertaining to, if this were to go forward, as far as what is allowed, what's not allowed, how are they going to unload them, what they're going to store on the property, and it's more than just the seeding. That's what I'm concerned about.
And I understand that, sir, but this board has a very limited jurisdiction, so we look at the impacts to the resource areas and everything like that. As far as the storage of the equipment, as long as the equipment is not being stored in a wetland resource area, we have very little say of where they can store their equipment, as long as they're not removing vegetation in a buffer, storing it on the salt marsh or anything like that. It's a
Equipment,
little
what do you mean
bit
by-
kind of out of our purview, and that's more suited towards a Board of Selectmen's meeting. Just trying to give you the right forum to follow your concerns, that's all.
When you say, you're saying equipment, what equipment are you talking about?
Well, you're saying the storage of the shellfish, what, buckets and bags
Not
and
buckets,
everything?
they're like big traps.
Crates, yeah, crates or
That they
traps,
sink
yeah.
in the water.
Yeah, so we govern, the uses in the water, in the wetland resources, as far as storing the equipment. If it's in the upland area, it's stored outside or in the upland, we're not gonna have concerns about that, because it's not impacting our resource areas. Like I said, I'm just trying to give you the right forum to bring your concerns to, because some of your concerns we may be able to address, and some of your concerns we may not be able to address, so.
So are you
Okay.
saying the portion I'm concerned about storing the trap boxes that are gonna be sunk is the portion that you can't help me with?
It depends on where that's why we've asked for a site plan, so they'll be identified on the site plan of where they're gonna be stored.
Right,
Okay,
and what
so-
part of the year they're gonna be stored there?
Okay.
I think that's it, let me just take a look.
Just trying to give you the right forum to,
So pertaining to
sorry.
additional concerns about that, you say the selectmen?
I believe so, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
And sir, one more thing, if you do have pictures of that boat sunk in Rands Canal, I can give you my email address, and I would like those forwarded to me. Thank you.
Any further comments from the public? Any more discussion from the board?
The only thing I have is, I think the applicant heard the concerns, not just about the upweller, but whatever, the things that are in our purview, that you just make sure when you come back to us, they're addressed so that you don't have to get continued again. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so we have a motion and a second for continuance to January 29th. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
29th. Is that what you said?
Yeah.
29th.
Okay, sorry.
Yep.
I thought I heard 23rd.
Unanimous, Susan. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Scott.
Next up, Town of Falmouth, Coonamessett River Gateway Park, 62 John Parker Road, Falmouth, Mass. For permission to construct an overlook and parking area with ADA compliant walkways and emergency vehicle access.
Oh, boy.
For the record, Betsy will recuse.
Thank you.
You're gonna have to stand there.
Then you won't know who I am?
I will. Put 'em right there. The big boss is gone.
Keeper of records.
Quite a structure.
See what you have to do to get our approval?
That looks like a fun project.
This is just
Biodegradable.
3D.
Dying to know what the sticks are for.
Question, man.
Computer?
Thank you. So, for the record, my name is Tom Bunker with BSS Design, and Joe Waller is a landscape architect, works with Stimpson Associates. We prepared the notice and some drainage calculations and whatnot, but Stimpson Associates really did all the design work on this and built that model. This property, I'll just introduce it briefly in the resource areas and what we're dealing with, and then Joe can get into some of the finer points of it. On, let me just. I'll bring this up first. This is the lower bog along the Coonamessett River, and it's currently, the Coonamessett River itself is currently being restored under a prior DEP number 4251, restoring the lower bog, and I believe the middle bog is being worked on now. This blue is the flood zone, AE elevation 10, so it covers the entire lower bog. John Parker Road runs up the east side of the site, and this is one of the crossings. There's a Dexter's Mill crossing, I believe, and Sampson's crossing up here. And you can notice on where this pin is, right here, this large sandy area, which is come into play as a previously disturbed area on the site. So a closer look at it. This is the lower bog from the Dexter's Mill crossing. This dike or dam has been removed to create free flow, and a boardwalk built across right here under the previous notice, and then a boardwalk has been built across this way. And a couple of parts of this project. One is to build a parking area on John Parker Road with some parking spaces and a drop-off for a bus. There is a meandering pathway going down the hill to access the sort of the edge of what was the cranberry bog. This all had been cranberry bog, and it's undergoing vegetation restoration. And there's also, as you can see on that model, a raised observation deck projecting out and then back in that semicircular fashion you see there. It does not go over the wetland resource area, but it comes up close. This is the existing conditions plan, or rather key map, I should say. We have two sub-plans, one for the parking area and one is a emergency vehicle turnaround down at the southwest corner of the site. And part of this project is to create a hard-packed surface that is ADA compliant around the bog. So it'll be a complete circuit around the lower bog, ADA compliant circuit, including the existing boardwalks that are there. The existing conditions plans, I'll again show, I didn't point out on the other one, but we have the blue here is the Coonamessett River. We have the 100-foot riparian zone here, the outer 200-foot riparian zone here. The flood zone comes up, covers the entire bog area, and this slope along the edge is a coastal bank. Believe it or not, we have this far inland, a coastal bank here. And this A zone is the 50 feet A zone for both the coastal bank and the bordering vegetated wetland, and the 100-foot B zone for those same two resource areas. The orange line is the limit of work, basically the limit of clearing. The X's are trees removed. I think there's 55 trees being removed and 58 trees to be replanted. And if you look at these X's, most of them are beyond 100 feet from the BVW. They're out in this area to make way for the parking, and the planting plan that Joe will present. All of them, I think, except 4 are being planted within 100 feet of the BVW. So we're moving 54 trees from outside to inside the 100-foot buffer to the resource areas. This shaded area right here is that previously disturbed area, which amounts to about, 17-some thousand square feet right here. I'm not going to get into all the numbers of the acres of riverfront area, but one number here is up to 63. You're allowed to you may be allowed to disturb up to 10% of the riverfront area on the site. and that would equal 63,000 square feet of possibly permittable disturbance on this site. But after not counting the areas previously disturbed, only 10,000 square feet of new disturbance, mainly this area up in here, the area which is not previously disturbed but is within 200 feet of the river. That's for the parking area. And this area, this is the observation deck here. This is being proposed. Part of it is a redevelopment. I have the calculations that the buffer zone planting to revegetate the previously disturbed area meets the requirements of the buffer zone planting. Although whether it's required or not, I'm not sure. I think it's not required because there's actually this raised, this observation deck, and the walkways are actually being permitted under FWR 1053-2E, which is limited projects. And some of the work, actually being just a little bit of the work right here, is correcting drainage issues from an existing road, and that's under 1053-2F. And those are both limited projects, but it does also meet the mitigation planting requirements. Briefly, the stormwater will flow off of this surface. There's a rain garden in this location here, and a rain garden over at the south location in here. The calculations were done to meet the town of Falmouth drainage requirements, which far exceed actually what's required to be done by DEP stormwater requirements. But there is an outlet structure in each of these rain gardens, which will then go to a leaching facility, which is more than 100 feet from the BVW, one in this location, and one in this, near the north entrance to the driveway. And those are sized to be more than adequate for the 25-year, the town standard for the drainage design. Except as I recall, I think this one had, like, in that storm, I think there was 15 cubic feet of excess, which could discharge through a pipe. And then there is a weir built across. This is the old, an old sandy road going down, and there's a little weir right here that will trap those 15 cubic feet and allow that excess water to recharge the groundwater. And likewise, at the south end, there is the inlet structure goes into a leaching basin in this location. At this location on John Parker Road, the catch basin has failed, and there is sign of much water coming down, and you can even see where water has made it all the way down as far as the road along the bog. There's a gully coming through here. What we're proposing is several of these weirs built across that gully to intercept and slow down the water. What makes it past that will then go into a third rain garden in this location, which itself has an overflow into this leaching pit. That's the drainage. I've described basically the project. Get to the last sheet over on the southwest corner. The fire and rescue department wanted to turn around at the south end of this roadway at the southwest corner of the property, and there's a small amount of clearing invasive vegetation. I didn't label it on here, but there's knotweed in this location, and a small amount of grading and compacting the surface to provide that emergency vehicle turnaround that they're looking for. So with that, I will turn it over to Joe Waller, who can talk more about the design that you see in front of you.
right. First, want to say thank you to the town of Falmouth for the opportunity to work on this exciting project, to Betsy, who recused herself. We're honored to be associated with this project. Tom has gone through most of this upfront stuff, so I'm going to skip through this. Just quickly going through the alternates, which were included in our submission. The first alternate was obviously to do nothing. The first alternate, which is where we ended up, was to build a parking and arrival gateway park at the John Parker location. This diagram represents that approximate parking location with entrances. The benefit of this option is it keeps the parking lot up at the John Parker road elevation, and talking with the police and fire department was a desired location for them. It also keeps the majority of the disturbances Tom described beyond the resource areas. Another alternate that we looked at was coming in to the existing driveway to the south, in using the disturbed area in that zone. The anticipated quantity of vehicles and bus vehicles would not fit in this location, as shown in this diagram, as well as the property between the zone of property between the two adjacent properties doesn't allow for a sufficient two-way driveway in that location. The third alternate we looked at was coming off the existing access north of the lower bog. This put the parking again within the resource areas, and there isn't sufficient space there to accommodate the requirements. This plan is the primary scope of this project. Tom has done a good job of describing it. Coming off of John Parker Road, we'd be a one-way driveway entering from the north. This driveway has been designed to accommodate school buses, passenger vehicles, as well as emergency vehicles, so the turn maneuvers are possible from both directions on John Parker Road. It'd be one way from the north through the parking lot with an exit to the south. A limited number of parking spaces carefully placed to minimize the impact on existing trees, and the routing of that drive and parking spaces carefully cited through many field visits to kind of walk that. And also thank the town Department of Public Works for helping with the survey of this area for us. From there, we have a drop-off and accessible parking location which abuts the accessible pathways which provide access to this aerial overlook, as well as the path system moving down to the north of that through a pollinator garden to the perimeter walkway system. We also have a path that continues to the south, providing access to the neighbors along John Parker Road. As Tom mentioned, also part of this project, an important part of this project, is to provide an accessible path within the existing bog service drives around this. So our proposal is to provide a stabilized stone dust path within the profile of the existing bog service road around the perimeter of this, so that red line wrapping this, connecting to the two boardwalk crossings is the remainder of the scope. Couple illustrative views. This is a view in the John Parker arrival, looking towards the river with the aerial overlook in the background here. The surface materials of the parking lot are proposed to be a hard pack, which is a mix of sand and gravel, very kind of natural feel, as I mentioned, carefully woven within the trees, universal access provided, and surfaces provided to meet the ADA requirements for accessibility. The aerial walkway is proposed to give people an opportunity to overlook the riverfront from this upper level. As you all know, the river restoration is quickly going to evolve from a largely herbaceous plain to a successional woodland and mix of woody and herbaceous plants, and this will provide an opportunity to really observe that corridor from an elevated position along the river basin. Within that frame of the aerial overlook, we're proposing to restore or replace the trees that will be removed for the parking lot. This is an elevated view looking at that accessible walkway along the edge of the river's floodplain, and the walkway then winding up underneath the aerial walkway. The aerial walkway has been designed to touch down as infrequently as possible, to have the most minimal impact on the ground as possible, and to really build on the vernacular of boardwalks which we've designed and helped implement crossing the Coonamessett River restoration already. So it's using the same components of, we're looking to use restored or salvaged wood, weathering steel, and found logs for our columns. So it all feels very much in the spirit of the existing landscape. This is a view of the winding pathway up through the pollinator garden to the north of the aerial overlook. We'll be reusing the stone blocks, which were from the lower dam, as seating and retaining elements within this procession from top to bottom. These are the technical plans which were submitted, and I won't get into too much detail here. The grading that Tom has mostly gone over. Materials, parking lot is primarily hard pack. The pathways are stabilized stone dust, which is also a permeable material. The aerial walkway materials we went through. You see the stone benches being located along those walkways. Planting restoration, using all native species, a mix of herbaceous and woody material. That's our presentation.
Tom, question for you. Just with the southeast corner of the map, which is the top right corner of the map, that entrance that they have right now, is there any sort of work that's gonna happen with the current entrance closest to Dexter's Crossing? Or is that gonna be
Which-
largely abandoning? I know you mentioned some sort of drainage swales going in there. I forget the terminology, but just.
The existing, no, I wasn't talking about anything.
Yeah, the existing drive is proposed to remain.
As
We're
is.
gonna put a gate at that location, but it will be preserved for emergency vehicle access.
But that's not really part of this. That wasn't part of our percent. What I had talked where we're fixing an area down here, in that corner, talking about down there?
Right, that's exactly what I was talking about, I believe.
Yeah, that's just a gully that's caused by some erosion from a failed catch basin. It's not down at the existing
Road.
southern
Okay.
entrance to the bog area.
Okay.
All right, thank you.
We had an abutter concern, that's all.
I think the only thing, you can correct me, down toward that area, there's an area, one of ours, that shows some knotweed.
Mm-hmm.
And I think they had in that, although I didn't address it, down, up here, down in this area,
Mm-hmm.
there's some knotweed. As also around the emergency turnaround, there's knotweed.
Okay.
But the area that I was addressing was right up here.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Good. Maureen?
No comments.
Kevin? Courtney?
I think this is great. Been involved to a degree with this since the bog wars. So, this is a wonderful step forward. My only question, and it really has no bearing on the merits of the project as proposed, but 50 years from now, somebody standing on that overlook, what are they gonna see?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think 50 years from now, we will see, much more diverse river floodplain with a mix of
I guess what I'm saying is, essentially you build this overlook, is this all gonna be mature forest, in fact?
We'll have to apply for vista pruning.
Excellent response.
You walked right into that one. Point to Tom.
I might not be around then, but somebody will.
Courtney will be
No,
here.
it's good job. I have no other questions.
Tom wins that round. Russ,
No cause.
Steve.
Great, it's a great project. I have a question about the pitch of the walkways.
Yeah, those will be less than 5%, so they're gonna be around 4.75%, which is less than it's still a sloping walkway.
Okay. And I think it's a great idea to put the benches on the way down, because, you know, regardless of, it's farther than you think.
It's a
And
lot
it
of
is
vertical
very
elevation to
steep,
navigate.
even at 5%. And we have no drainage or washout issues because of the walkway.
We've been very careful to pitch any runoff away from those pathways, so we're mitigating the water, as Tom mentioned, uphill to prevent any erosion of those walkways.
Okay. And the walkway around the pond, can I assume that the pitch is virtually zero, except for the crossings? So it's very, very accessible, is the
very
point
accessible,
I'm
it's
making.
Following
Yes.
largely the existing grades that are.
Okay. Thank you, great job.
Peter.
I just want to say, I think it's a great project.
Thank you. Mark?
Well, have you looked totally at the drainage coming off the packed road itself and parking? I mean, that's probably not gonna be very pervious, I don't know. There may be a runoff issue, it's right at the top of the hill, so are you gonna protect the hillside of it?
The roadway the driveway that we're putting in,
The driveway you're putting in, the driveway and the parking spaces
yeah, that,
are all
that's
right
what,
at the crest of the hill.
well, that sheet flows into the, that's what we're talking about, the rain gardens. There is a pitch toward the bog, that's where it gets picked up by swales and
Okay.
rain gardens.
Well, I heard this rain gardens, but they'll be going over the full length of the parking, the road there?
Along the driveway area has some ups and downs to it, so it'll flow away from the high points. There's basically two low points. One, the drainage, you can see the drainage on there, but basically this area with these trees is one long rain garden, and the water that gets into this will flow slowly, and there's a series of the stone blocks, so it kind of make little pools running toward the north. And then from there, there's an inlet that goes into a leaching pit.
Okay,
And-
so those swales go north-south, right parallel with the parking, with the,
This one does,
Stone road.
over here too, the water will be picked up all along the edge. The low point of this driveway is in about this location here, and all of this green area is rain garden that will collect water.
and you think, you mentioned Weir is farther down where the road comes off of Parker, where the ditch comes off Parker Road.
And, yeah,
But up along those swales that go along parallel with the parking access road, they'll have
Up
flow
here?
preventers or blocks in them in some way?
talking about this roadway?
No, just go north, left to right where the parking area is, with those few, right along there. Is there anything to stop the flow of water as it's
Well,
flowing towards the garden?
it's a contained pool with a,
If you go back to the detailed plan of the parking lot, we might,
so this whole length right here is the rain garden.
Okay, okay, so
And in
it's
this,
much larger.
and in this it's contained at the north end, there's a catch basin inlet with a deep sump to collect sediment, and then it'll go into this leaching pit. here.
You calculated flow based on a 25-year storm?
25-year, 1-hour storm, yeah, 2.5 inches in 1 hour.
Is that good? Is that okay for this area?
I've never experienced 2.5 inches in 1 hour. It's the standard that the town requires for roads and driveways, but I've never heard of it happening here that much water.
Thank you. That's great.
And it's very porous soil, too. It's a coarse sand all the way through.
Thank you. Okay.
Good, okay.
With that being said, I'd make a motion to close the hearing and take it under advisement.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion from the board? Any comments from the public? I'd like to say this is a great project, so thank you guys for your efforts.
Thank you.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? It is unanimous. Thank you, gentlemen.
It's a big job.
Just one after the
Carry
other.
that out. You want to carry that
I
out?
like the way they're structuring this project.
I want to know who got to have the fun part of building that.
I know, it was a fun project in the office. Everybody was excited to be involved with it.
Really cool. Thank you. Can't wait to go walk on it.
It's gonna be cool.
It is going to be really cool. I think the ADA compliant is amazing. That's a lot of area. For the ADA compliant.
Betsy can come back.
Betsy's playing with her model.
Okay, next up are continued hearings under a notice of intent. First up, Bonnie W. Simon, trustee, 138 and 144 Gardner Road, Woods Hole, Falmouth, Mass., for permission to demolish and remove an existing single-family dwelling, reconfigure an existing driveway, conduct invasive species removal, install restoration plantings and landscape modifications with all associated excavation, clearing, grading, and utilities.
Mr. Chairman, the quorum is everybody except for Courtney.
Good evening, my name is Ian Warner. I'm a landscape designer representing Bernice Waller Landscapes and our client Bonnie Simon of 144 Gardner Road. Here tonight to discuss the plan that we gave to you representing the changes that we made with your concerns and adding some specifics to that plan from your recommendation in our last hearing. And I guess at this point I would ask if there's any questions of that plan.
Staff has reviewed this plan, and I believe that you have addressed concerns that we've put forth.
You did.
You got comfortable with it? The last one, right, Betsy?
Questions? He addressed everything we asked.
Courtney, no, Ross?
No questions. This is what we were looking for. Well, thank you for the additional information.
Peter?
No questions.
Excellent. Motion to close?
Second?
Okay, we have a motion and a second to close the hearing. Any further comments from the board? Any comments from the public? Hearing none, I'll call for the vote. All those in favor to close the hearing, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? It is unanimous. Thank you, sir. Next up, John Mullen, 410 Surf Drive, Falmouth, Mass., for permission to raise, R-A-Z-E, existing pilings and horizontal structural members and construct a cabana with associated utilities and to install a sewage tight tank.
The quorum for this project is Kevin, Maury, Betsy, Jamie, Russ, and Mark.
Not Peter, not Courtney.
Not me.
Not Steve. Kevin, Maury, Betsy, Jamie, Russ, Mark.
Mr. Wall?
Good evening. Through the chair, for the record, my name is Brian Wall. I'm an attorney. I represent John Mullen, the applicant, who's here in the audience tonight, and with me is Mike Berselli from Falmouth Engineering. I'm sure the board recalls that this matter has been heard twice. This is the third continued hearing. We were pretty much ready to close at the end of the second hearing, but there were some comments and some concerns that were finite, and we asked for a continuance to address those, and we submitted some supplemental material by the deadline. Essentially, there were 4 requests for information. The first one was Mr. Gurney wanted some more information on what was the definition of a tight tank and whether or not it consisted of a new septic system. And so I have provided a letter back in December 23rd that basically gave that information to the board. I looked at the Board of Health, State Sanitary Code regulations, and I gave the definition of what a septic system, a tight tank is. It is by definition deemed to be a septic system, but it is also by definition impossible to be a new system. They're only allowed to replace existing failed systems when there is no other alternative, and that's all in the letter that I provided to you. The second area of questioning was staff brought up, actually let me just say, Mrs. Lincoln brought up the question of whether or not zoning required parking. And we asked, Mr. Mullen is being represented before the zoning board by Kevin Clower of Ament Clower. And so we asked Kevin to put a letter together, and he did, and that was submitted to the board as well. And Kevin Clower is of the opinion that the project does not require any parking, and it's all laid out in his letter. There's essentially 2 reasons for that. The property is already permitted by a special permit that does not require parking, and the application before the zoning board is essentially to modify that, basically to raise the structure to meet FEMA requirements. And it is his opinion that because there's an existing special permit that does not require parking, and the modification won't require parking, therefore no parking is required. He also got into the zoning bylaw, and I'll be brief about that because I don't think it's part of your purview, with all due respect. But in any event, the parking requirements say that you must provide parking whenever there is an increase in parking over what was in existence in 1979. And in 1979, this property was improved with a bathhouse cabana, and they're essentially going to be putting it back, and there's no increase, and so therefore there's no parking requirement triggered. I would also note that the plan does show that there's a bar or board across the pilings to prevent parking from going in. And also, the next topic will explain further why there can't be parking. Commissioner Harlow Hawks pointed out that back when Hurricane Bob came through and these various rebuilds were going on, the board took the position that it did not want to see the structure become any bigger than what was there before. Our structure was slightly bigger because, as Mr. Borselli explained, when it went up, the stairs had to get bigger, and that created a few more square feet. So what the applicant was able to do was to take the stairwell about halfway down the vertical distance and then turned it and put a landing and came back. And by bringing the stairwell under the structure, we were able to bring the square footage of the structure back to what it was in 1991 before Hurricane Bob destroyed it. And also, by bringing the stairwell under the structure, a car now can't get in there because there's stairs. The fourth topic was staff had asked us to provide a copy of the application that was submitted to the Board of Health and the minutes of the Board of Health meeting and the Board of Health decision. The Board of Health decision is attached to my letter that I talked about regarding the tight tank. And also, I had some communications with staff, and I know that Jen got those materials on her own initiative from the board. And I asked her if it was, since she had them, did we have to submit them? And she said no. So I think we've addressed all of the items that the board had asked us to address. And I would just remind the board respectfully that this process started with staff's report saying that we had not adequately addressed the standards. And you might remember that Stan Humphreys was here at the last hearing with a letter giving his professional opinion that all the performance standards are adequately addressed. And Mr. Berselli had the same opinion in the narrative for our notice of intent. So I think we've supplied all information that the board wants. I think we've addressed all the comments and concerns that have been made through this process.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I'm going to start with the easy one first. I did tell the applicant's representatives they did not need to submit formally the application from the Board of Health, because I did go and get it from the Board of Health myself and had a conversation with the health agent. I think the issue was whether or not was the Board of Health informed that it was a gray water only cesspool. And I don't think Scott could remember. It wasn't really reflected in the minutes what was said. Board of Health unfortunately is not taped, but we do have a copy of the application that was submitted. Most of the materials that were submitted to us were submitted to the Board of Health. There was just one page that really specified from the old order of conditions that it was a gray water only cesspool, that was not provided to the Board of Health. As far as a tight tank being a septic system and not being a new septic system, this board's regulations state that it's a new septic system or expanded scope of use. So I think in regards to the tight tank, the board needs to determine whether or not you feel that it's an expanded scope of use by adding the black water component to that system. And again, the system is in the coastal dune. The coastal dune will be altered. The applicant is stating that they'll recreate the coastal dune. And then that brings me to the parking. This isn't zoning. I'm not going to go into it. I'm not going to go into Kevin Clower, not too deep into Mr. Clower's letter, Attorney Clower's letter, but you have in your record documents from your associate town council, documents from the town planner, and documents from the building commissioner, who all state that parking is required and that there is some disagreement within town staff that this is a modification of the zoning board special permit. They don't believe it is a modification of the zoning board special permit. That said, that's a zoning question, and we asked that the zoning issues be resolved prior to coming back to you. So the parking is still an outstanding issue. It has not been resolved yet from the Zoning Board of Appeals. And that is a big piece of this project, because where parking needs to be, and now Attorney Wall says that the staircase is in the way. That does need to be resolved, because if parking is required by the Zoning Board of Appeals, by the building commissioner, whoever determines that, it is going to change this project. So I think we've been stating those same comments since the onset of this project, and those are all we have.
You're going to ZBA?
Tomorrow.
Tomorrow night.
That's right, you told it.
You also did receive, I did send I did send the Attorney Wall's packet of information to your associate town council, who did offer her opinion to you.
Did she see Kevin's, Mr. Clower's letter when she wrote that?
Yeah, she saw the whole package.
So it's entirely relevant, so yeah.
Now, I do believe that Mr. Clower has submitted a new letter to ZBA since that one, and I don't have those dates in front of me. And I know that town council was going to respond to that letter. I have not seen the response to that one as yet. It was after this one came in.
But it's really irrelevant to her recommendation. So should I read it?
And as I said, if the board wants to, you're
communications with council are confidential and privileged until this board decides to read it into the record or discuss it.
Well, I mean, we're gonna have to reference it anyway.
Okay,
so,
then,
I mean,
okay, yep.
Town council's advising us that we need to wait for that ZBA determination on the parking. So I think I'm correct saying that, in a manner of speaking, that's a procedural thing for us versus so with that in mind, we don't wanna close until that's determined tomorrow, correct?
I mean, it's really, I mean,
We can close, but the potential is that we'll,
Okay, so Betsy's gonna read this.
I haven't seen it,
For the
yeah,
record.
so.
This is from Associate Town Council.
You had requested an opinion from this office on the behalf of the commission on the following issue. May the commission approve an NOI for a project where parking requirements, if any, have yet to be resolved by the applicant, who has a pending application before ZBA? The commission does have the requisite authority to review, does not have, thank you, the requisite authority to review or determine parking requirements for a particular property under the zoning bylaw, and that question must, in the first instance, be resolved by the ZBA. A complete NOI application contains all substantive details, including determination on elements which may be required by the zoning bylaw, such as parking, which are central to the question of whether how the proposed project impacts the protected resource areas. It would be premature for the commission to render a decision on an NOI which has such central elements as yet unresolved, as the application is substantively incomplete. The commission should await a final determination by the ZBA. The applicant may agree to postpone the hearing on the NOI until after such a determination is obtained, but if the applicant does not, and a decision is required by the statute before ZBA resolution, the commission may deny the application as premature and incomplete.
So you see where we're at.
So I have a response to that, but before I get to that, can I just ask the board, is the board satisfied with the other items that we provided about the tight tank, the revised plans showing the stairwell underneath so that the structure's no bigger than it was before? Are we down to just the parking issue?
I'm satisfied you've given us the information.
Right, I'm not asking you for your
I
decision.
agree with your
No,
decision,
I
with the
understand,
information.
Betsy, I wouldn't suggest that.
Clear.
I just want to, the last time we were at a point where we thought we had a complete application and the board disagreed. I want to make sure that we've given you everything that you want.
No, and I appreciate that, especially the definition of septic system.
Certainly,
Market ask.
right.
Just one quick question, Brian. So the staircase flip-flops, so before the landing was back towards the deck, right, Mike?
Sure, Mike Borselli can explain that.
Yeah. And then you kind of,
No, it shares a
No.
footprint with the building.
it shares the footprint with building. Okay, yeah, okay.
I'll show you on the plan.
So therefore, it's not additional square footage.
Okay, yeah, that's what,
That's a good
that goes to
resolution.
Maury's point.
When we heard the comments about it would be, that it was the opinion and policy in the past to not make these structures bigger than what had existed, the architect went back to the drawing board and did two things. He modified the stairway, so you come down the stairs, there's another landing, and then it goes underneath
Got it,
the
okay.
building. But he also did something else that wasn't mentioned, and that is the entire structure was scaled down in size
Okay.
some, like by about a foot around the entire perimeter. So it's purposely designed to be the same exact square footage as the previously approved
It's a good
structure.
resolution.
Okay, thank you.
Can I speak on one other thing that was mentioned? I just want to clarify this matter of no new septic system or expansion. I think it's important for the commission to know that what you approved in 1992 was allowed wastewater, although only gray water, to go into a cesspool that leaches into the ground and was very close to and very likely in the groundwater table. And to convert that to a permanently sealed vessel that would be pumped on a schedule that was waterproof and watertight, that resulted in zero discharge to the barrier beach or the water table, even though it was also going to introduce black water, is something you need to think about when you think in terms of expansion of use, because when the regulation that talks about expansion of use is talking about like expansion of use, meaning increases in the number of bedrooms, or in this case, the introduction of black water in addition to the previously approved gray water. The concept was that there was something leaching into the ground that was going to have an impact on a wetland resource. A tight tank will be permanently sealed and not have an impact. So you need to think of it in those terms.
Point taken.
So if I can go back to the parking, I read Attorney Mullen's opinion. I just saw it, so I'm not going to say I agree or disagree. What I would respectfully suggest is that zoning is not part of your purview, that's part of zoning. I think this could be addressed through conditioning, a condition that says no parking on the site, a condition that says any change in that condition requires coming back for further permission from the board, no change in the site plan without further permission from the board. That would lock us in so that if the zoning requires it, we'd have to come back for an amendment. But having said that, if the board feels that it wants to wait, we're not going to oppose a continuance. We will agree to a continuance. And I guess we'll have to talk about a date, because I don't know if the zoning board is going to reach a final decision tomorrow night or not. I would hope that they would, but
I think we're just trying to follow the
Recommendation of council.
Yeah, and we've
you know,
also been
completed
advised
application, you
not,
know.
not to condition things like that. I mean, we want a complete package.
well,
It would be
yeah,
preferable,
I
Brian,
don't,
to
I
have
don't,
a
yeah.
continuance.
I know, I
in
don't,
mind.
I don't want to go round and round. I think it is complete, but I don't want to, I'm not going to go again. I know which way the wind's blowing, so why don't we ask for a continuance? And maybe what I could say is that if the zoning board reaches a conclusion, why don't we agree on a date a couple of weeks from now?
Okay.
And if the zoning board reaches a conclusion, we'll be back and we can report what that is if you won't already know, and then we can decide what to do from there. But would I ask that if the zoning board does not complete its process and continues it, can we write a letter to say, can we continue it because of that reason without coming into it?
Oh, absolutely, Brian, you
Okay.
know that. We're not
Sure.
gonna require you all to come in just to ask for a continuance because zoning hasn't done it. And, I mean, you have to understand the position that the town staff and the town board is in, is we have 3 different documents from 3 different department heads saying that they disagree with Attorney Clower's opinion in regards to zoning. So that it kind of puts us in a difficult position, and we really do need to wait for the zoning board of appeals. So what date, what do you think, Brian? Anytime in
I didn't bring my
January or
calendar.
February?
That's fine. I didn't bring my calendar because I
It's
thought we
okay.
were done. It's out in the car. A
You wanna
date
look
at your
Oh,
convenience.
well, I mean, there tomorrow, it really is. We meet the 15th, we meet the 22nd, we meet the 29th of January, then we go into February. And like I said earlier this evening, we don't have any scheduled meetings off right now, so we're wide open January and
22nd.
February.
Why don't we ask for the 22nd, just because in case the zoning board does something that we
Okay.
might need to reply to, I'd like to build enough time in the calendar to be able to do that.
And that's fine, and then if you need additional time, all you need to do is write us a letter, you know that.
Thanks, and I do appreciate that.
Not a problem.
At the request, at the request of the applicant, I'll make a motion to continue to 1/22/20.
Thank you.
That sounds like a lucky number.
Maybe it will be.
Who seconded? Who seconded?
Do we have a second?
I'll second it.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second to continue to the 22nd. Is there any further discussion from the board? Any comments from the public? Thank you.
Thank you very much.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? It's unanimous for the quorum.
What's next? Where are we going
Something
next?
exciting.
We are going to request to amend the existing order of conditions. First up, well, let me back up one second, just to say it, the Cape House has been continued, 101 Lake Lehman. So 207, 217, 223 Meadowneck Road has been continued to 212. 101 Lake Lehman has been continued to 25. So request to amend existing order conditions. First up is Ivor Bloom, 245 Sipwisset Road, Falmouth, Mass. For permission to install native plantings to mitigate for areas of installed gravel.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the commission. Again, for the record, Mike Borselli, Falmouth Engineering. I represent the applicant. Ivor Bloom owns the property at 245 Sipwisset Road. He was issued an order of conditions to raise and reconstruct the existing single-family dwelling, which he did. We thought everything was done and he was ready to apply for a certificate of compliance. We did a as-built plan as required in the order of conditions, and, but we discovered that Mr. Bloom had installed some crushed stone areas, specifically on the end of the newly completed house. If you look, it says gravel, and there's a dashed line incorporating his AC units and generators on this side, and there's a little gravel strip along the house here. There's also some gravel over here. So at the time, we had proposed that to be lawn, and it's common, property owners don't understand that you don't see crushed stone as permeable. So they think crushed stone's okay if it was okay to have lawn. He couldn't get grass to grow there. It's on the shade side of the property, and he's very particular about his landscape, and he didn't realize he couldn't put crushed stone. So we discovered it through meetings with staff during the compliance process, and we talked about it with Mr. Bloom. We did the calculations on the increased area of, it's not impervious surface, but it's pervious surface that doesn't support natural vegetation, which is the part that a lot of people don't get. So we did the math on the required mitigation, and Mr. Bloom was very open to providing the mitigation. This is all an A-zone because the A-zone's 100 feet in this case because it's in a area of priority habitat. So it's a 3-to-1 ratio. So if you do the math, there's notes on the plan that go through that. It required 2,100 square feet of mitigation. He wanted to do the mitigation instead of removing the gravel. So the green areas that you see are currently lawn. We're proposing to do with native plant material, and the plant size and type, he did some research, and the material he wanted to propose is itemized as note 6 on the plan. He wanted to maintain a path because there's a path system that leads down to Salt Pond area bird sanctuaries and the beach beyond. So his order was running out, so we first requested an extension to keep it alive, and then we applied for an amendment to allow this mitigation planting to be installed. That's basically sums up what we're here for. Happy to answer questions.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, just to reiterate what Mike was saying, they applied for a COC, and staff went on site and evaluated what was on the property and had noticed the gravel. So that's why we're here today. And they did properly request the extension a month prior to when the order of conditions was set to expire. And my only question for Mike is with the area of, it's labeled as remove invasive plants. I know we had a little discussion about that. Is there a plan for what's going back in there? Like how much square foot?
I didn't calculate the area, but I would say it's somewhere, it's approximately 200 square feet. It's just like an island of invasives. He was hoping to just remove it and allow it to be lawn, and there was no need to plant. He felt that since he was planting the mitigation planting and enhancing the buffer, that could just be a grassy area.
That's all I have, Mr. Chairman.
That's why you have native plants. We kind of figured it was gonna be lawn when we saw that.
Well, we don't get
The
credit
board will
for
have
it.
to discuss that. The board may require it to be native shrubs. So, it is invasive, it is offering habitat, but we'll let the board decide what they wanna do with that one.
I would just say to, I mean, I understand, but I would say that if you consider the significant lawn area that we're eliminating with the mitigation planting,
I understand, but the mitigation plantings have to go in because your client expanded the
true, but he could
impervious
also take the
surface.
gravel out.
So, we're not taking the grass up, you know,
No, I understand, but it still
out of
enhances
any
the
sort of
buffer,
improvement.
and
It's a requirement.
he could have had a substandard grassy area where the gravel is instead. But he thought it was a good idea to do the mitigation.
All right, Ross.
I'm good.
Steve?
It's a good solution, I think.
Peter?
I like the solution. Yeah, it sounds to me like, I agree with you, Mr. Barcelli. We're getting more by having a good grouping of mitigation plants down there than a scrubby lawn next to the house. I think it's great.
No question.
No questions?
Kevin?
I move to close. Yeah, I move to close.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to close. Take it under advisement. Any further comments from the board? Any questions, comments from the public? Hearing none, I'll call for the vote. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? It is unanimous.
Thank you.
Well done.
Thank you.
Next up, James Kerrigan and Jennifer Coons, 28 Ashley Drive, East Falmouth, Mass, for permission to eliminate the proposed retaining wall and proposed fill, relocate the proposed house, driveway, and septic system, reduce the size of the proposed house, and to construct a deck.
You all set with that, Ken?
Hopefully it'll last.
I need some help.
Okay.
Good evening. My name is Ken Breyvogel. I work for the firm of Jack Planners Colleague. This project's 28 Ashley Drive. The original notice of intent we filed in September of 2018, and the board approved the project and issued an order of conditions for that. The client requested us to file a amended order September 2019, about a year later. And the amended order was to install a retaining wall and fill behind that. And the board here approved that request and issued an amended order in October. The client has gone in a different direction. He wants to build a smaller house. He wants to eliminate the retaining wall and the fill behind the retaining wall. He's going to also put a deck on this smaller house. So that's a very quick summary of the project. The, on the board here, the proposed house is the small square. This darker line here is the original house that was proposed and approved. So the new house same distance as the original house to the top of the bank. So it's no closer to any of the resource areas than the original house that's been approved. So I think it's an improvement that's less impact on the wetland resource areas. Questions?
We don't have any questions. I just want to remind the board that if you remember this project, we allowed the applicant, if they could meet the setbacks for the historic coastal bank. Remember, this is an area where the town and the state undertook a reconstruction project of that boat ramp, and we relocated that coastal bank landward. So we allowed the applicant to use where the coastal bank was historically. If they could prove that they could meet those setbacks, we allowed the project to go forward. So I just wanted to remind the board.
Right.
And it does appear that they're still holding that setback from that original coastal bank line.
Yep.
Okay?
Yes, that's correct.
Courtney?
No questions.
No questions, no questions.
Steve?
No questions.
No questions.
All right.
I make
Make
a
a
motion.
motion to close the hearing, take it under advisement.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion from the board? Any comments from the public? Hearing none, call for the vote. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? It is unanimous. Okay, let's take a 45-minute break. Shut 'em up. See? All right. Next up,
45-minute break.
Scott Lutz, 109 Madeline Road. I'm sorry, this is continued request to amend the existing order conditions. Scott Lutz, 109 Madeline Road, East Falmouth, Mass., for permission to amend DEP SE 254483 to adjust the location of the house and stairway to meet zoning setbacks.
Good evening. For the record, my name is Wayne Tavares. I've been before you a number of times for the same project. We have a very simple fix, I hope. No, I think I'm getting the hang of this.
He's all hat now. You can run a workshop on it now.
Yeah, there we go. Last time I was in, we had an amendment, and we went through a list of about 4 or 5 things. They were all approved, but in my lost thought process, I moved these trees to the upland for more of a screen for my client, and I moved them out of the resource area erroneously. So I put them back exactly the way they were originally. And that's it. That's all that we did. That's why I'm
Short
here.
and sweet. You guys good?
I have no comments.
I think you addressed everything we were looking for, but Huh?
Courtney's not on.
then I won't ask him.
Okay.
Kevin, do you have anything?
No.
Maureen?
All set.
Nope.
I'm good.
I'm good.
Good.
All right.
Make a motion to, one.
Motion to close and take it under advisement?
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and multiple seconds. Any further discussion from the board? Any comments from our selectmen? Hearing none, I'll call for the vote. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? It is unanimous.
Thank you.
All right, thank you.
You know, I just,
Thank you, Wayne.
Didn't even see you there, Sam.
next up, other business, discuss/vote the hire
Ing.
of consultant to review 207-217-223 Meadow Neck Road.
Not for hiring,
Hire
it's for
Ing,
hire.
sorry. Okay, so, 207, 217, 233 Meadow Neck was continued tonight. They continued it again. We did reach out to 3 consultants. One was already retained by the applicant, so that would have been Jim O'Connell. He was retained by the applicant, so he will be providing a report. We reached out to another consultant, but because of what I understand is their travel schedule, it's just the timing was not going to work out. And we reached out to the Woods Hole Group, who did provide us with a proposal including reviewing the permitting documents, site visit and assessment, alternatives analysis, technical memo, and an attendance of at one of your hearings. I did review this. The cost would be $5,860 to retain Woods Hole Group Services, and that's what we're recommending at this point. I did have a discussion with the applicant's representative, did let them know this, and if the board agrees or votes to engage with the Woods Hole Group this evening, I'll be sending this proposal over to Don Monroe with Coastal tomorrow. But I did have a discussion with him. We will coordinate a site visit with your consultant and the applicant's consultant as normal practice, so that everybody's on site together. And we'll review the process, and hopefully we can get this going. I think they did continue till February 12th, because they do want the opportunity to review your consultant's report prior to the hearing, which I said was fine. Okay?
If I'm not on the quorum, can I vote to hire the consultant?
Yeah.
Anybody have any questions, comments?
The consultant can meet the 2/12 timeline?
I don't know, I'm thinking so. If Don, we did have a discussion that we put the 212 as a placeholder.
Is it in his proposal that the work will be completed within 15 days, or is this a timely review? I don't want them to have to continue.
Well, I mean,
And they
with all due respect, Steve, I mean, they came to us
Oh, I
in
understand
November. So, I
completely.
mean, we're gonna get this moving as soon as we can, you know.
Very
I did reach
timely.
out to, you know, the consultant. Unfortunately, he had already been retained by the applicant. So we are moving as quickly as possible. I will be in touch with Mr. Monroe tomorrow, because we cannot engage in the services until we receive payment from the applicant. So it's all so tomorrow, I'm gonna reach out to the applicant's representative, let them know that this is the proposal, that we require a check in the amount of this. Once we receive that payment, then we can engage with the consultant. That's the way it works in a municipal system. I can't sign a contract with Woods Hole Group until I have.
I understand all that,
Yeah.
and thank you for that
No.
explanation.
No,
The
I'm trying to
question
move
I
this as
had
quickly as possible.
Is, can you get yourself and the two consultant groups together?
I can go out
I have
whenever.
no idea
yeah.
how long that
Yeah.
takes.
And I think everybody knows that, you know, this isn't gonna drag out for 6 months.
Yeah.
We're gonna be moving on this.
Okay,
Yeah,
thank you.
absolutely.
Anyone
I
else?
make a motion to adjourn. Oh, I'm sorry. I make a motion to accept. I make a motion
Second.
to have Jen move forward with the
Woods Hole Group.
Group.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? It is unanimous.
Now I make a motion to adjourn.
All those in favor, say aye. Opposed?
Jen, they left the